What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Alright, my microphone should be on. You guys should be seeing me. Sorry for the slight delay. I had to go get this. Hi Jens, hi Carlos. Let me know if you can hear me. New setup, so, you know, changes happen. But basically, I've got kind of a bunch of figures. This is not all of them. I think I mentioned some in the thumbnail. God, my brain is not working. I mentioned some in the thumbnail. These are figures that I own that over the years have either gotten broken or have broken or just need like a little bit of well, we can fix that. There we go. I should be a little bit louder. Who knows? Or need like a little TLC. Famously, I have had Knickknack's Mysterious Heroine X Altar twice now. So we fixed it once already. And then I think he bumped it off a wall and it broke again. Yeah, partially because this figure is, I think, in my opinion, right? And take this as someone who buys a lot of figures. I think this is pretty badly designed for a figure. because the whole point is it was supposed to rest on its base like this, but it has no like counterpoint of balance or support. Like if there was like a support on the knee, it would be fine, but it's so heavy on top and so lean to the side. Yeah, so this is how it broke originally. Is that it broke the bottom tread of the shoe from the rest of the base. And the initial repair tried to super glue the shoe back to the tread and then down onto the base. So, you know, that's super unfortunate. And I think the thing is, if you actually look, they thought that they would be making it strong enough by putting like a metal pin through the shoe. But that metal pin was obviously not strong enough for any impacts hitting it, like if it were to fall or be bumped. So, great figure, very beautiful, very pretty, incredibly impractical if you're moving things around, or you have a dog or a cat, or you're bumping a base. This one's been broken for a while. It's one of my Marco figures. I'm actually pretty upset because this came in the package broken, and I shipped it back, and they returned it to me, and it was still broken. And I don't know. I don't want to risk, like, damaging the piece down here, but if I could get it off. Okay. So that'll make it easier for me to glue the bottom back on. This is a common issue I find with a lot of figures, is that often they're just not, like, the bottoms of the shoes are not super well secured to the rest of the mold. So obviously, as you can see, this has happened twice, and then Knick-Knack knocked Hassan off her base, and her peg snapped in the base. And the thing is, it's not technically, like, the figure itself isn't broken, but the thing is, it no longer, like, sits properly anymore, and honestly, I'm kind of at the point with this figure where, like, I feel like I'd rather just, like, glue it down and have it not, you know, spinning loose, risking the other peg. So, that's what's wrong with her. Not a huge fix. Honestly, I could probably get the peg out now that I grabbed these, but I don't want to, once again, damaging the peg would be very, yeah, no. The peg will not come out. So I'll show you what's up. Because the shoe holder is so arched and the peg is like barely sticking out, there's nowhere to grab once it's broken. So, you know, I have no way to kind of get this peg out to kind of try to re-glue the peg. And then if anyone who's ever tried to fix figures knows, fixing the pegs is a non-starter. Like, unless you're building a completely new peg from, like, epoxy sculpt that you know is going to grip on to the figure, it's not happening. And the thing is, hold on, I'm going to make my life a little easier. As you see, I have actually cleaned up my desk space for this. That does not mean that it is clean, per se. So, that's what's up with her. And then, my beloved Ku, my darling. There's nothing ever wrong with him. The head of his guy bulk snapped off. This is the pop-up parade figure. I believe that he got hit by a cat at one point. Yep, he got hit by a cat. And the thing is, I want to fix him with the guy bulk still in his hand, because that way I don't have to risk kind of sliding it in and out of his handhold, because the guy bulk came separately and you had to insert it. And obviously this is the so to say, insertion end, because it doesn't have the spear tip on it. But that means that it would be put through a lot of stress if I tried to fix it that way. So, I think I mentioned, like, one other thought of surrender. Oh, yeah. Poor Knick-Knack's, Morgan. Yeah, Jens, unfortunately, fortunately for me and unfortunately, I have used epoxy sculpt in the past. I normally have a container of it. I've been using my epoxy sculpt before I shifted around stuff in the office. I was using it as, like, to hold figures up, like, literally just putting them on the top of it. I can't find where I packed it away when I was moving office. Which is really unfortunate because that would be really nice to use for at least 2 of these. Epoxy Sculpt would be a nice option because, for example, hold on a second, let me grab something. I think important to note, so this is the first figure I ever tried to fix. It's not an anime figure, it's just this little like metal statue that I got when I was like a little kid, and I bought Epoxy Sculpt for this. And I bought Epoxy Sculpt for this because glue did not work. Crazy Glue didn't work, E6000 didn't work, and it's because the metal, so this wing was snapped off, and the metal of the wings was so heavy, and the metal had chipped away when it broke because it's slightly sort of malleable, bendable metal. I don't actually know what it's made of, probably like pewter or something. But what happened was the metal chipped away, so there was no way to kind of match up the corners and edges. I had to like rebuild the connection. And obviously, because I was pretty novice with Epoxy Sculpt, put it under this camera, you can see that like it's a pretty big chunky fix, right? And the angles of the wing did not really let me get in there to sand it with the equipment I have. So for me, Epoxy Sculpt is a little bit of a kind of bigger project requirement. However, I did grow up in the arts industry. I did competitive figure skating, right? And as a result, I am well and truly familiar with our good friend E6000 and Gorilla Glue. Now, I did have to go out to get these from the garage so I could literally open my E6000, which is a common problem you'll find with E6000. Is that it's almost always sealed shut at any time that you try to use it after immediate purchase, which is not super convenient. And I think some of the things here are not, I will not be going for like E6000. I'll be going for epoxy. Well, not epoxy, but I'll be trying to use the super glue. I might have to get like a paintbrush or something. So now what's happened with Knickknack's Morgan is he has the Morgan Nendroid. And I'm not exactly sure what happened to her, but she got bumped, and this is her spear in 3 parts now. And the thing is, I've tried to fix Nendroid parts before once. Not on like this scale of like the actual like tiny plastic pieces broken, but on a ball joint, right? And I tried to use Epoxy Sculpt for it, and it did not work, right? So whether or not this one is going to work, we don't know. This is so small. And I really don't want to lose those pieces. So I think probably the easiest one to start with will be him. Oh, goodness. Also, you will note about your E6000. Sometimes it just starts coming out. No assembly required. The thing is, with E6000, it's bulkier than most like Crazy Glue types, right? So it is going to like swell up slightly once you put it on. And that's not a bad thing per se, because it helps with your seal, but you do want to kind of really get it in there. And then, you know, press it down. Ooh, can you stop pumping out? And obviously you want to like kind of, so okay, so I can see it, I can feel it stringing when I lift the shoe base. So we're actually just going to leave that to set, and actually that's going to be our first test. We're going to see how that sets. You need to stop. I will probably end up ordering another Epoxy Sculpt if some of these fixes don't work, is what I'm thinking. And then I will just use Epoxy Sculpt for anything I can't kind of like fix today in the normal sort of collection of getting things fixed. Now, the problem is I feel like I had Gorilla Glue and now I don't. Like, it's gel, so it's still okay. I can see the liquid in the, okay, there is liquid in here. All right. I was trying to get this to like spew out some liquid, but honestly, it was really making me struggle. When you have old Gorilla Glue, that's what happens. Now granted, these are probably, obviously these are not the best materials for fixing figures, but these are relatively minor fixes, right? So this is small cosmetic things. I mean, she basically doesn't even need to technically be fixed. I could just position her very carefully and it wouldn't be a problem. But it bothers me a little bit, and I like her to be sort of more on the durable side. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do here. I think, if anything, probably slip a little bit of glue down. There's a groove on the underside of her foot. Love how this camera is not focusing at all. Well, either way, she's got like a groove on the underside of her foot right here where her peg is. And I'm thinking that some glue right there, and then just the adherence of herself to her own base, will probably fix her as much as I need her to be fixed, to put her back up on a shelf and feel confident that she's not going to go like flying and like shatter again. Like even worse than before. Who knows? For this one, I'm thinking super glue. I don't think I need the bulk of E6000. I definitely don't need epoxy for that. Same thing for Morgan and Ku's spear. Those both need to be on the thinner material side. However, this bitch. This bitch. Our first fix involved epoxy sculpt. Which means I actually have a fairly large, sort of like, chunky base. And I'm thinking that E6000 is maybe the solution here. Just pump it full of E6000, wipe away the excess. I have a couple of really big mugs, and then what we typically do is we put her upside down with her foot and base sticking up so that she doesn't put stress on it while she's drying. And then she should be good to go, which is, optimistic, but that is the hope, because outside of building her an actual support, there's not really a way to fix this other than that. Like that's really our only option here. Like I can even see grooves in the plastic where we originally tried to get the metal peg out. Manufacturers, don't make your pegs to be more durable. I can't stress this enough. I need your pegs to be more durable when they're going into a figure, Like, please. It's not the worst thing ever. Please. So yeah. Yeah, Jens. That's about me every single time I need to get the E6000 open. I'm just glad that we have like 10 sets of these in the house. So in the general scheme of like figures, right? I also want to talk while we kind of wait on that Marco to see if my E6000 is really going to stick it, if it's good anymore. There's also sort of like there are figures that are like very durable and figures that aren't, right? And sometimes it's individual pieces of the figures. Like, for example, this Cucullin, right? The pop-up parade figures. I find that the figures themselves tend to be really durable, right? Like the actual bodies of the figures to the bases, very durable. Things like this is always bound to break. If you kind of step on it or drop it or it gets whacked into something this thin in PVC will almost always break. So I don't blame the figure for that. However, one of the problems I do have with the pop-up parade figures, and that's that I can demonstrate to you on a different figure right over here, is that one of the most common problems that the pop-up parade figures have is that the pegs break off. So I have one foot with a peg and the other foot with the peg in the base. And this happens a lot with the pop-up parade figures and stuff like that. And normally, it's not a problem. The only reason why it's currently a problem on Serenity is because it actually leaves her loose to flop around. For example, on this one, T.H.E, T.H.E just kind of settles down into his base, and he is solid as can be. Does not move. I'm in no fear of him breaking again. So, for example, him, and I can still kind of like carefully unpeg him. Yes. So for example, I don't find a problem with that. Like this is fine. This is an acceptable level of like fragile for a figure. He's surviving, he's thriving. He has suffered no other damage from his peg breaking. And fun fact, his peg broke because of the inflexibility in the peg and the way that the legs are aligned. So it's kind of like tension. Tension holds this figure down really well, so it doesn't need any other supports. So he actually didn't break in falling. He broke when I tried to unpeg him to move him. So all I literally wanted to do was get him off his base. And the only way that I can currently get him off his base is by wiggling, right? I have to wiggle him out, right? So that he doesn't break his last peg. But when both pegs were in, that was not an option. Like you could not wiggle him free because of where the pegs were located, right? There's no rotating that when the pegs are solid. And when I tried to pull them directly out, it snapped. Just one of the pegs just snapped. And that is not an uncommon problem to have with figures. It is just an unfortunate, honestly, an unfortunate design flaw. Your figures can still be perfectly good, perfectly functional, they look great, but pegs will snap. Like, it happens. So there's kind of, that's an example of a broken figure that I do not intend to fix. As opposed to, let's pull out another little dude. Okay, so this is a bit more complex. So, right here we've got the Sesshomaru Nendroid. I'll show him off down here so we can kind of tilt his face up, right? So this is Sesshomaru Nendroid. And this Nendroid came with a whole host of tiny different little pieces, right? And not all those pieces are secured on super well. So this is not broken, but it simply nests. So this peg off of his shoulder, right here, he's got a peg. It's hard to see. There we go. You can see it on my finger. He's got a peg, and it nests into a single hole that you can see within this cloud. It does not nest firmly. It does not nest securely. It rotates. And so if you turn him, it falls. You might think it's broken. It's not. It's just the way that this piece of the figure sets. So you have to be very careful. However, he did come with a different piece that did break. So Sesshomaru comes with one of the most amounts of just like tiny parts that I've seen on an Nendroid. Like so many different like hands and arm attachments and feet and stuff. And I have a second sword from him, I believe with the blade out that his figure can hold. And the hilt snapped from the handle. Or the hilt snapped from the blade. And that is not the first time that I've had something like that happen. Just the tiny pieces of Nendroids are so susceptible to like snapping off. Peachy, not on the chair, not right now. I love you, but not right now. So that's one of the risks that you kind of take with Nendroid parts is them being very fragile, right? And also not super well designed. So like, for example, the peg that holds this sword in, right, is so small. And the area that it's supposed to sit in is not properly carved out on the figure. So I can get it to kind of push in and it just doesn't really grip, right? And that is because the area to receive the peg is just not open. It's just not carved out, and I can't carve that out. Like that's not something that I can currently do without damaging the figure much further, right? So Sesshomaru kind of sits very carefully with sort of as much help as I can give him. His pieces hold himself together and I live in fear every day that he will break more. And the thing is, this is not like a factory defect that I'm not getting repaired, right? For example, I got this figure and it came broken in the box. Like the hilt and blade were already broken inside the box and I could see it. So I packed it back up, sent it back, got a replacement, and it happened to the replacement too. And when it happened to the replacement, I just decided, you know what, I don't care. I won't display him with that particular sword. I just want, I just want to have this figure. I'll keep him like in one pose, maybe two. I won't touch that particular blade, and we'll be fine. So it's kind of like the decision that I had to make with this figure. So I love Nendroids, but they are finicky little things. And as you saw with Morgan's spear, sometimes the breaks are not in things that are super easy to fix. It's so small, right? Like the point of breakage is absolutely tiny, So there's puts the Shomaru away before I drop him catastrophically. I did actually get a different Sesshomaru, so I do have two. On that note, there's one other Nendroid I have that is sort of irreparably broken, per se. And that is my lovely little Geralt of Rivia. So, as you can see, I have him in his bathtub outfit. So, Geralt's Nendroid comes with a bathtub outfit that you just attach and detach his head from, right? It's one of the ways to display him, kind of iconic. I do this because his body is broken. So one of the pegs, one of the actual ball joint pieces inside his leg that makes it like swivel and move, snapped. So his leg cannot connect to the rest of his body. So I can kind of like fix his leg into his body so that it kind of like stands in a single position and put his head on that. Or I can display him in the bathtub because he can't actually use his leg. And as a result, I have been hunting I do want a different Geralt Nendroid, so that I can have him displayed outside of his tub, because I like his tub display, but it's not what I bought him for, and I do wish that I had something else. Yeah, finally he can get Bakusaiga. That would be great. You think Tatosai is accepting collect calls from the real world? Damn. I should see if he is. But yeah, so this is my little Nendroid. He's missing his leg. His Witcher potions are not helping him heal. In fact, I think a missing leg is something that his Witcher potions probably can't help him heal. But that is not a fix I will be attempting because I have already attempted it. I tried to sculpt a brand new ball joint for him, right? Using epoxy sculpt. And the problem is that it's so small and the peg holding it to the leg is so tiny and thin that I have yet to figure out how I could get the epoxy to adhere properly without completely freezing up the range of movement, because I could just seal the leg in place and then his one leg will not move, right? It will not move at all. He can stand in one place. He can't use any of his dynamic action. Like, he can't pose, but he can stand in one place and just kind of, sit. But, is that really a solution? I think, let me see if I can find his body to demonstrate. As I sort through the myriad of figures on the shelf. I do have a Nendroid box. when you have as many Nendroids as I do, eventually, this is what you end up with. So, as you can see, 2 boxes. And we're going to move some of these poor figures out of the way. Geralt, you can sit there because you're not that heavy. This is your stand. You can sit back on your stand. Put the glue away for a second. So when you have a lot of Nendroids, at some point you end up with boxes and collections like this, right? And these are spare parts and pieces. So some of these you will recognize. So I think this is an Aussie head, right? It's one of Ozymandias' faces, and it's holding his extra arms and stuff. So little bits. Rimuru Tempest from Slimed at the Ken. Dobby. Here is one of Sesshomaru's other faces, along with the broken hilt. Okay, so I do have the hilt broken. I try to keep all pieces, even if they're kind of like broken or out of sorts, because, you know, there's always the possibility that at some point I might be able to kind of fix what's happening, right? So, just as a size reference, so you guys can see. This is the hilt of his sword. It is absolutely tiny, right? And it's broken. So, obviously, that's not happening anytime soon. These are someone's swords, God knows whose. Honestly, these might both be his. I could be wrong. See, I got more Aussie pieces, as you can see, in the second box. And if we move some of the stuff in here, this is from the Aquaman. Because I wanted to see if I could find... Alright, those are Dobby pieces. There's one of Sesshomaru's other legs. I have no clue in some of these cases how these are supposed to look like. Okay. Because they just look a little odd. You know what I mean? Like, the pieces themselves are strange. Let's see. 10 points if you can guess who and which figure this is from. I never wear it. I never have him wear it because I am terrified of dropping it and losing it. Here's the helper. They're from the same figure. And you all should be able to recognize this. Oh no, here's the broken Sesshomaru hilt. So apparently I have 2 broken Nendroids. Swords. It happens. It's so common. Much more common than you think. So there's the blade that goes with that hilt. And I do have 2 of them for some reason. Not exactly sure why. I don't quite remember. Hi, Tacos. Aha. Found it. So this is the broken blade piece for the other hilt. Right? So tiny, tiny pieces. Really, really annoying to try to keep track of and fix. It just makes your life a living hell when you're trying to keep track of it. This is the third hint for what that red piece belongs to. So yeah, tiny pieces, lots of broken ones, but these ones, honestly, I probably will not try fixing. They're just too small, too fragile, and I can display the figures successfully without them, as you can see. So there's not really a point in me trying to fix any of those. It doesn't make sense. They're just too fragile. Kind of definitely not going to get this back into the order that it was in before, but you know. And yes, I do keep spare arm bits inside the heads of their respective figures, if I can. So, this is my Geralt of Rivia. As you can see, he is missing his leg. And you can see where the ball joint goes, and there is no ball joint. It's gone. And the peg to attach it is so small, and the area is so small that I cannot fix that. However, if you kind of stuff his leg in like that, you can display him in a single standing position with his head on. Yeah. It's, you know, it's the first time I've tried to use the camera like that, so I think it just needs time. But, yeah, so you could display him in a standing position with his head attached in one way. Just that way. And that's it. There's no other option. However, I don't blame Nendroid for this. I'm 99% certain that this is a knockoff Nendroid. So the Nendroid, the company, from what I believe and from what I've heard, I believe that they sell their molds when they're done with them, or they used to. And so there were other companies that would produce like cheaper, less good versions. And this is one of those, I think, because as much as I paid for it new in box, this did not cost the price of an Nendroid. So buyer beware. I don't blame, Good Smile for that one breaking per se. That little scarf piece was Lord Elmaloy II's. I exclusively keep him in his oversized t-shirt and mug look because I refuse to deal with anything else. Also, he has a cigarette, which is so small that I try to keep it at all times fixed into his mouth of one of his spare heads so that I don't lose it because of how fucking tiny it is. So. The joys of Nendroids and having tons of little figures. See? Geralt's body does not fit properly. Go. Go, go, go. There we go. And I do have quite the collection of Nendroids. It is prodigious. I do not need this many Nendroids, to be honest. We're just kind of gonna put this off to the side. Alright, let's see how Marco's doing. Beautiful. Let's see, this is what I mean. New setups, new camera angles. Alright, let's see how Marco is doing. Okay, it's definitely starting to stick. I'm happy with that. It's not going to be coming off very easily. And to be honest, once he's on his figure base, I do not care anymore. Like, as long as he's settled on his figure base, I will be happy. So, let's give you a try next. So I think there's maybe an effort of two things. Is we dribble... I think we just seal her into her base. Because anything we do is essentially going to have that exact format. So I think we dribble a tiny bit into the unsealed peg. I do mean like a tiny bit. And then just the smallest of dabs onto this one. Okay. And that's how we're going to do it. If I wanted to make her removable from her base, I would be a lot more concerned about what I'm doing. But I'm going to be honest, I don't at this point. She looks good on her base, and I don't mind the way that she looks on her base. However, I am going to need to maintain a fair bit of tension on her, which I did not think about until just now, because one of the things about her is she's got another tension hold. So I do need to figure out how I'm going to do that accurately. So we're going to hold her for a little bit. In the meantime, how is everyone doing on this fine morning? As I just hold down the figure. Her outfit really is just entirely backless. I actually picked her up on a whim. I found like her and BB just in a random bookstore, and her box was damaged, so they were selling her for like 20-30% off or something, and I didn't pick up BB, but I ended up picking up Serenity because I was like, hey, it's a Hassan, and I don't know when I'm gonna have the opportunity to get another Hassan figure, you know, like this is a rare occurrence for me. I don't think there's that many Hassan figures, especially not affordable ones, because I do not have the financial means to be buying like $300 figures on the regular. Not even normally. I don't own a $300 figure. I think the most expensive figure I own probably cost me like $90 max. So we're going to hold her like that, because I do not need to put tension and weight on the front foot. That is already sealed down. It is a very nice figure, you know, for as much as I paid for it. Oh, that sounds nice, Jens. I don't, there's a couple conventions near where we live, but I've never been to... I've been to one of them. I don't know. Conventions always fall when I'm out of money for the month, or like I just have other stuff going on. So it's not ever something that I was kind of particularly pushed about forcing myself to kind of get to. You know, especially if I don't have a group of friends going with me personally. Let's see. Ooh. Oh yeah, Zero Rare. Hopefully that will be fixed soon, because that is unpleasant. Yuck. Yeah, that's fair. I'm sort of looking forward to Easter. I'm gonna get to see a bunch of my family at Easter. Family I don't normally see, which will be nice. Yeah. I don't really celebrate Easter. Well, my mom and I aren't very religious, so we don't celebrate, you know, the religious holidays as religious holidays. I think for us they're more of like a time that is set aside for family per se, because they are, you know, like Christmas is a national holiday, which means everyone has it off practically. I mean, not quite everyone, but a lot of people have it off, which means it's much easier to make like group plans with family on Christmas and that sort of thing. So, oh man, you really don't want to stick to your base. I'm like tempted to tie you down somehow. Goodness. Probably doesn't help that I keep shifting because I'm uncomfortable. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know how well this one is gonna take. We're gonna see. This might have to be revisited with like a rubber band or something that I can cut off afterwards. Because I don't have any spare rubber bands on me right now. But if I could like fix her foot down, that would be good. Unfortunately, I also don't have any of my yarn on me right now, or I would just tie it down with yarn or some other form of string. All of my string is away. So, just one of those things. I think one of Knick-Knack's other Morgan's got like a pointy piece that like comes out of her chest as well, the Nendroid. I think Knick-Knack's also broke there, because I think when the figure knocked over, both pieces broke, but I think he lost the little point, so he can't find it. That's the sort of thing where if you had like a matching paint color, you could sculpt that out of epoxy sculpt, and then very, very carefully, not the epoxy sculpt on its own won't adhere in that case, but like a tiny dash of like the smallest amount of crazy glue and just holding that little spike in place would be enough to kind of fix the issue there, you know? Like, per se. I've also got a very large broken dragon figure that needs a fair bit of repairs. It literally just got knocked off its shelf in the process of moving. And so that figure at some point will come out for repairs. And I do mean, it's a massive dragon. It's actually, you know, the Nick knife, that like metal knife. It's the dragon that holds that as a display. And they've not been displayed together because I don't have enough space anywhere currently. So the dragon's always been kept separate from the sword because it's a little shorter on its own. But I knocked the dragon off a shelf and it's in like 30 pieces right now. And I do just need like a brush, crazy glue, and time on that figure in particular. Although because how broken that one is, I'm very much considering painting gold anywhere I do repairs on it. Kind of like kintsugi almost, just because I think it would look really good. Yeah, Jens. Yeah. It was pretty fucking bad. It was pretty catastrophic. I do think I managed to collect every single piece though. When I was painting my bedroom, you guys, I don't think you guys have ever seen it, but I actually have a very large, like, decorative, let's say, like, Anubis sculpture up top, and my mom knocked it off, like, the top shelf of my bookcase, and it shattered, and it took me, like, 30 minutes to, like, sweep the room and find every tiny piece and finger that snapped off and stuff. And then I spent like an hour gluing it back together originally. So gotta love that. Let's see. Nope. Not bonded yet. Honestly, I don't know how long this one is gonna take to bond. And it might not. Yeah. This one might not work just at this moment. And that is because E6000 does not have a quick drying time. It has a longer drying time, which makes it very strong if you can get your thing to last the time it takes to achieve the drying time, but you got to get it to last. I say, absently looking for something I could use to tie this together. Or even tape it together, I'm going to be honest. Because I can see the glue starting to harden, but it's just not... No. Okay, so. Alright. Yeah. Okay. That is good to note. Also, the glue does not want to stick inside of Serenity, and that is because of the way that Serenity is constructed. Very interesting. Fascinating. Yeah, okay, so good display of it is if you look here, it's actually does not, if you put the front foot in, right, the back foot doesn't quite reach all the way. But if you put the back foot in, the front foot is just short of the peg when the figure is unstressed. So basically what that means is this figure is essentially meant to hold itself in place through pure tension. But that tension is actually almost too tight, which is why it's broken in the way that it has. And it will need a different kind of repair. So in this case, this is one of those cases where I actually may come back to this with epoxy sculpt. Because I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bulk up the bottom of her foot slightly with epoxy sculpt. Like put a small layer so that she's not tensioned into place anymore. She just kind of rests on that back foot instead of it being out. Because as you can probably see, there is a gap right here. And this is when the figure is sitting naturally, is it just does not meet up foot to base perfectly. Oh, that's a good angle for you to see the gap. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fill that out with epoxy sculpt, probably next week, because I think I'm either going to need to find my epoxy sculpt or order a new one, because I do need it for some other stuff. So yeah, just fill out her foot and treat it like an extra part of the base extension. Paint it white, and then kind of leave her to her own devices like that, because this is too... I mean, you physically have to like pull the figure by the foot to kind of get it to match in place here. So you literally have to like stretch it the long way. I love the... Jesus fucking Christ. You would think you do one thing, and it's supposed to work great. And then it just doesn't. There we go. I don't know if that's going to be better or worse. Anyways. Okay, so in that case, the good thing about E6000 is you can remove the glue residue before it dries if you have not allowed it to fully dry, because it gets to kind of like a gummy texture when it starts to set, which is very sticky, but it needs to sit for like an elongated period of time. Okay, so you're going to need epoxy sculpt. We know that for certain. You just don't fit your base. And that's not something that you can fix, like by getting a new base or buying a different figure. It's just the way that these figures are held in place is such that that's not going to work, which is good to note. On the other hand, I think we're going to take the easiest route possible over here with Ku. And I'm thinking that a little... Alright, if I have to unscrew you and then dip the end of the fucking... I will. Here's what we're gonna do. Okay. Alright. Gorilla Glue sets much faster, so just gotta... Alright, for Gorilla Glue, we're gonna hope this spear tip is relatively straight, because I am now holding it in place with my hand and hoping that it will set. Okay, come on. Scoop up that extra glue that you just dumped on my hand. I hate it when I get glue on my hand. As I just suddenly go silent because of the level of concentration that I am putting into this stupid spear. Okay. Alright, I've hit the point where I'm steady. You will be somewhat pleased to note I did spend some time grinding Lilum Harlot. I am nearly at the end of Lilum Harlot. There's very little left for me to do. Oh, I do not need you to destabilize Ku. Keep holding your goddamn spear. Do not. Do not slip. Okay, come on. I need you to be like solid. Yeah, so I did a bunch more Lilum Harlot grinding. I'm near the end. I'm on section 16, 2 of 2. I got, you know what? I actually managed to get through that fight that I was stuck in just one try, yesterday night. And then I decided to go through some of the other fights because I was like, hey, maybe I'm on a roll. I was, in fact, a little bit on a roll, which is great. And then I got stuck on those two dragons. One's a caster, one's a lancer, as the final boss. And it was really annoying because it was like, oh, because there's a caster boss, you should take a rider or something, is what it told me to take. And so, at least I think that's, yeah, I feel like rider was what I was told to take. So I took a rider, took two riders actually, and then got my shit wrecked and handed to me, you know? Which was not super convenient. Hello, Darren Kill. Yeah, Jens, this is torture. This is one of the things I hate most about fixing figures is just holding shit together. Which is why we have the figure mug for Mysterious Heroine X Alter, because we will be using the figure mug. You are not strong enough yet. Okay, we're gonna keep holding you. Never have I hated Cucullin more. I hate small figure I would rather have a figure break catastrophically in some very large place than have minor issues like this where tiny pieces break off. Honestly, from a distance, nobody would have even noticed. It was just because it was bothering me. Yeah, so I have these giant coffee mugs. I'll have to go get one in a second when we start on Mysterious Heroine. But basically, they're big enough that I can put a figure as large as her head down into it and not need anything more to support her. Okay, now that the glue has partially dried, we stand him back up so we can look at the angle. And once you've checked the angle to make sure that this part is as straight as it's gonna get for a fix, it can be left. In theory, we probably want to like hold it up like this a little bit so that his own gravity of his spear kind of like weighing down on itself seals it, at least in part. And if this ever comes out of his hand, it's going to have to be by breaking, I think, at this point. But there we go. Cucullin, once again, has a Guy Bolg, and it is completed. And my hands are tacky. My hands are very tacky. I might need to grab some metallic red paint to do some touch-ups, but it's looking good. We're going to hold that for a little bit longer. Probably give it another 10-15 minutes before I'm willing to move properly. Because I want it to sit straight up like that for as long as possible. Or at least as long as I'm willing to let it sit straight up like that. Yeah, the figure mugs are, they've been around for a while. They're also jokingly the mugs that, like, I use for knickknack because that boy likes to hydrate and I cannot. Like, I live off Diet Dr. Pepper. I don't hydrate. So sometimes as a joke, I'll like give him his fucking tea in one of those mugs or like a water in one of those mugs. Now, one of the differences between E6000 and Crazy Glue, and why I often prefer E6000, is because E6000 dries much clearer than Crazy Glue. So Crazy Glue, if you touch it during the drying process, it'll often end up a little white, a little crusty, and that's because the glue is like reacting to you, right? So unfortunately, like Crazy Glue, Gorilla Glue, those have that like texture. E6000 doesn't dry white, it does dry clear. But E6000 is also like it's a textured glue. It doesn't just kind of melt into the crevices. So it's something like this, right? If I were to use it on his spear, it would create a very visible sort of circle, or like bump right where the glue met. Whereas with the crazy glue, I don't get that like giant bump, and then I can later paint on like a little bit of metallic red if I need to, if I'm really bothered by like what's happening with the color. Whereas with E6000, I mean, you could try like sanding down the glue bubble, but then you risk like kind of messing with the integrity of the fix that you've created. Which is why I don't mind so much using E6000 to fill up like internal cavities when filling a fix, like on the Marco figure, right? Where there was a bunch of empty space inside his foot where the gel could like grab onto and spread around and kind of create a really good seal. And you're not going to see that it's, you know, a physical texture in there. As opposed to him, where this is a very delicate, tiny piece that's very visible, and you would be able to tell immediately if there was a giant bump around it. Because of just how delicate and small the figure is and all of the parts attached to him. Benefits and deterrents to different methods. It's one of the reasons why epoxy can also be a little bit annoying to work with. I prefer it on internal fixes. Like when there's a gouge on the inside that can be filled with epoxy and then used, epoxy is a great option. But on the outside, it creates sort of like a gray texture. On really small things like this, epoxy wouldn't adhere on its own. Like you would need to add another adherent, or at least the epoxy sculpt that I use. I know that epoxy also has glue. I've never used the epoxy glue, personally. So, I'm not sure how the glue would react. Ugh, the fumes of Gorilla Glue. They are pungent, they are strong. I've said a few times to Knick Knack before that I almost wish, I feel like it would be almost more expedient to create just a support for mysterious heroines like Knee, right? Just like a piece, like an epoxy sculpted piece or a plastic piece that just goes up, like sits on the ground, but like gently cradles her knee to sort of support the weight of the figure because it is so heavy. It like genuinely, in my opinion, I think that would be the better option. Whether or not that's what we end up doing, I'd like to see if I can just re-glue it, and then Knick Knack will be very careful not to knock it over again, because if he knocks it over again, then we're gonna have to start getting creative with making a little support. And the thing is, I can sculpt a support, but that doesn't mean it's gonna necessarily look good with the rest of the figure. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, I will not be making a clear plastic support. It will be made out of sculpting clay, and so it will have a color. And I'm not great at, like, sculpting little details to make something look a specific way. So, you know, if we wanted, like, a theme or something, I would not really be able to do that great. So, you know, the dangers of having figures. Yeah. Poor Mysterious Hair. And the thing is, it's a nice figure, too. Like, this is a very nice figure. She's not holding her sword because it's annoying to keep it on while I'm trying to work with the figure, but it's a nice figure. It's a very nice figure. I just don't think that it was designed very well, because if it breaks at the break point where the peg is, you're fucked. You know? Like, you're just fucked. There's no... I mean, it's so solid for some goddamn reason. And so crooked. Like, that peg can barely go up that far because of how crooked the figure is on its base naturally. It just doesn't make sense. You know? Like, the way that the figure is positioned does not make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion. She's got issues. It's okay. Cool. You had better be so very grateful for this. I was so tempted to just grab one of the guy bulgs that Skahak holds and put it in his hands. But their figures are at slightly different scales because they're from different brands, different lines. So unfortunately, it would not match 1-to-1. Who needs it to match though, right, Koo? You just need a spear. Any spear. You would think. Oof. Gonna be scraping glue off my fingers for a while. Ooh. I'm trying to think. I don't have that many broken figures, thank God. I mean, oh my God, I had the worst. I've got this set of One Piece figures, right? The original crew up to Chopper joining, right? And it, way before Wano or something, they released a set of figures with all of them wearing like kimonos, and carrying like those paper umbrellas, right? And love the figure set. But for the goddamn life of me, every single one of those little umbrellas has like a thinner handle than even the guy bulg here. And then they all attach to like the paper fan with like a single like click. And I think every single one of them has broken. And my solution has just been to like super glue that shit together so tight that they are never coming apart unless they break in a different place. Because every single time I moved them, they broke. Yeah, but from a distance, gents. From a distance, I could pass. Like, it would pass. Like, from far enough away, you might not even notice what had happened. Especially since between the two Skahak figures I have 3 guy bulks. But I think, like I said, hers are just big enough that I would not be able to get them into the grasp of his fist at all. Okay. 2 more minutes, and I will let him down in favor of starting on Morgan. Because I would like to try to get that together next. And it is going to be a bear. Yeah, that's going to be very unpleasant to do. Chewing glue off my fingers later. Yeah. Okay, alright. You are now no longer in danger of sealing down to your base weird, so I will stick you back in, and then we're gonna just leave you to... You know what the other solution for you is? I just thought of another solution. In theory, if I still wanted Serenity to be removable from her base, I could always just get like a very, very small band of black and just secure her foot down on the base as like a removable option. Just tie her down to her own base. And treat it like it's part of her outfit. Like, one little extra black band probably wouldn't be that noticeable. You can see the gap that's there when I squeeze it. And you can also hear the plastic kind of grunting as it's squeezed. That figure does not like what's happening to it. And you are doing wonderfully. You're looking pretty taut. Okay, yeah. Alright, the E6000 on this one has already settled enough that it's no longer coming off. Yeah, Jens, totally. Exactly. All right. You should be fine. We'll keep you here for a little while. All right. Morgan. So the problem here is that there's just, I think the option we're going to go with is the nuclear one, is that I need access to a bunch of glue. And I'm just going to kind of dab the piece I need with the glue, if I can. Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Did you get it on you? Do the unthinkable. And all right. So, this is going to be in two parts. I'm going to fix the big part to the little circular base first, because this will take much easier than trying to go the other way around. So, that is on. We're going to hold that in place, putting sort of gentle pressure on it for maybe... Can I get the alignment? You know what? Okay. I'm aligning the star points to the sides of the spear. Okay. Star points are aligned. We're just going to put some gentle pressure down on this for the next, I'd say, 10 minutes. It's a pretty small surface, and we want this glue to be pretty bonded by the time we start trying to attach the other half of it. So let's say 10 minutes. Time ourselves to about 10:20-ish. And then we'll try the other half of it, which is going to need to be held differently, which I am not excited for, although I might have just come up with a solution for that. It requires me to move Geralt, so I'll do it in a second. See, ideally, for something like this, I would say, personally, I understand that, like, Good Smile doesn't do stuff like this because it would add a lot to, like, the production cost. But in the case of something like the Guy Bolg over here, or, like, Morgan's Spear, honestly, I personally think that it would be smart to, like, put like, almost like a needle-sized piece of metal, like, right down the center of it when you're pouring the mold. Yeah, so Darren Kill, Nick, something bumped it at Nick Neck's place. It got bumped off his desk. And so it broke into 3 pieces at the break point. So we're going to try to put it back together for him. There's also apparently a little pointy piece on Morgan's, like, chest armor or something that sticks out that also broke, but he could not find that piece on his floor for me to repair to the actual figure. So we're just fixing the spear. But yeah, if it was me, I would put, like, a metal core that ran from, like, maybe, like, here to, like, up through the tip of the spear. And, you know. And I think that would really help in the durability of things like the Guy Bolgs or these little tiny pieces. Personally, I just think it would be better, or invest in, like, designing some of the small pieces, like those swords I showed you from my Nendoroid box that were broken, to just be slightly more durable, a little less pliable. Maybe make those pieces out of hard plastic instead of making them out of, like, the softer PVC, right? That's the one thing, at least, like, the top of this Morgan blade is, like, much harder than like those swords were, for example, right? So maybe you need to make those swords out of, like, whatever's being used, or whatever the texture of this particular type of PVC is, for better durability. Because I think if those pieces were, like, hard plastic, they'd be easier to keep intact when falling or when accidentally dropping things, and B, actually easier to fix, because hard plastic, right, like larger surfaces where plastic is hard, is you can just ever so gently, barely even touch it with, like, a nail file, and then put a little bit of glue on it, and it'll seal right together like there was never any break. It's wonderful. Exactly, Jens. Like, a little metal core just to hold things together. We have articulated hand bones like that in the lab on campus, you know? Like when you need like articulated bones, or you need to seal, like we have like a broken bone and you need to indicate how long the bone was when it broke, because you have that knowledge, like for sure, put a little bit of wire down the middle so like everything holds together nice and strong, you know? It's a better option than some other things. The point of this spear is driving directly into my palm. That's how I'm holding it steady, and it is actually quite painful. Good for you, Morgan. Put it on the numb tip of my hand. Exactly, Darren Kill. Like the wire in the center. I really see. That's one of the things. The mysterious heroine. You will notice in this base that there is a slight metal glint, right? Like right over there. That's because this base actually had a metal peg, but the metal peg is so small that it like literally barely penetrated the tread of her shoe, right? Because of the angle the figure is on, having it go directly down into the base, you can see it better here, because you can see where the metal is. Having it go directly down into the middle meant that it could only go up to like barely the edge of her shoe, right? And then it doesn't continue up into her leg. So that means the rest of this heavy figure is stuck counterbalancing on a single peg that's only held in by like 1/3 of a centimeter of space up into the foot on the very inner edge. So why would you do that? That's just a stupid way to balance a figure. This is so stupid. I have such issues with stuff like that. I'm like, it's not good. There are better options here. My God. I hate having to hold stuff in place for glue so badly. This is the worst. God awful. Jesus. And the thing is, because I have to hold it in, I couldn't even be playing a video game right now. I couldn't even be like Minecrafting or something. Wow. I hope that Morgan's spear, the circular part in the center, the points of the stars on either side, is supposed to line up with the other lateral pieces of her spear, because that's what I've chosen to do, rather than kind of turn it the other way. I suppose Nick Nack could always re-break it if that's not the way that he wants those pieces oriented. I will not be helping him fix it, though, if he re-breaks it deliberately. Not that I think he would. It's mostly a joke. Pieces this small, it doesn't really matter at a certain point. Like, it just doesn't. I am curious to see how this figure goes into Morgan's hand, though, because I've not seen the Morgan Nendroid in person. And for some of the Nendroids, they operate on the same physics as that Cucullin Guybolg does, where they just, like, slide on. Or, like, it's supposed to come apart in one place and then clip in and out around that. And the thing is, if this is meant to, like, clip in and out, that's no longer going to be an option by fixing it. You know what I mean? So, like, it might be that Nick Nack is going to bring this back to me and be like, hey, I can't get this into Morgan's hand because the way that she holds it requires you to be able to clip and unclip the part. And in which case, my solution will be, okay, we break it again where the glue was, put it in her hand, right? Like, detach her hand, put it in her hand, and then re-glue it again. And that will be incredibly annoying to do, I think. But I would do it for the figure. Oh my God, one more minute before I try the other side. Come on. Jesus. Yeah, this is the sort of thing where if you're doing this sort of thing, like, at work, you, like, need someone to talk to, or, like, put on a podcast, honestly. Like, genuinely could absolutely eat away at time to, like, put on a podcast. I know that, Fall of Civilizations just dropped their, Mughal? It's either Mongol or Mughal. I think it was the Mongols video. Love Fall of Civilizations. Absolutely stunning. They do these history podcasts about like the kind of the rise and fall of great civilizations in history. Um, and it was spanning usually from like an hour to like 4 hours long, and then they do a podcast version that's just audio, and then a few months later a fully edited like documentary style will come out with like, you know, visual aids and stuff like that. Okay, 10:20. All right. All right, you are solid. Good. Okay, let's dip the next piece. Get us a little glob on there. And then the much harder seal is going to be this one, because you do need to be relatively straight, and I have to figure that out. Okay. Oh, shift that. Okay. All right. There we go. It's original seam point. Okay. Now we're just going to be holding this for a hot minute. Kind of like with Guybolg. I just need it to be solid enough that I can prop it up on something at some point soon. And then once it's prop upable, it'll be sealed enough that it can be left to fully harden. Honestly, in the case of something like this, it's so small and it's so fragile in this break point that like I almost want to say like surround it with a glob of like E6000 or something on the back end and just let it be one large conglomerated piece per se. For your own peace of mind, for the figure. Oh, it's so hard to hold something this small into place, and it's starting to shift off of its mark. All right. That's its mark. That's where I want it to be. All right. There we go. Okay. There we go. Alright. It's going to be straight in at least one direction. I cannot guarantee it's going to be straight in both directions. Look at it from a very specific angle. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Alright, so it's holding its own weight now. So now that it's holding its own weight, we kind of want to let it sort of hold its own weight to a certain extent. Like, we want to... Yeah. Alright, so we'll hold its weight up. We're going to wait like a full 10-15 minutes on this. Actually, probably going to wait till 10:30 and then see how it's holding up, because we're holding it right now by the bigger, heavier end. And at 10:30, we're going to flip it around and hold it by the other end and see if it can actually be held by the figure head up. It might be that this becomes something where Knickknack's Nendroid has to hold it point down, you know, kind of like it's buried in the ground. But I'm kind of hoping that he won't have to do that, and that it will be strong enough to hold itself up again, which would be the ideal goal. It is a very nicely detailed piece. Will say that. Like, they put a lot of effort into the way that this spear looks. It's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, the Nendroids, sometimes they have such problems like that, Sesshomaru Nendroid, but then you get others. Like, I've got Madara Uchiha up there, and like he's got the scythe connected to the gunbai with like the chain, and it just looks so good, and there's so much detail that's been put into it at such a tiny scale. I'm absolutely terrified of him falling, though. Like, if he falls, so many pieces of that figure are just going to shatter. So I don't move him very often, if at all. Like, I try not to move him if I can help it. I do wish Serenity wasn't on just like a white base. It'd be nice if she was on a black base. That would make the fix a little bit easier because it won't look like I'm banding her to the base. Maybe I can like paint her base as well. That would help. Also blend in the epoxy when I add it. It's too bad I couldn't get her peg out. Might try one more time. Now there's a little bit of grip from the glue. Because that can help sometimes. You never know. Foot is falling asleep. Oh, God. I think I might be starting a new game next week on the channel. I don't know yet what I want to play, per se. I've had a request for Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So I might try Black Flag, but I don't know if I'm going to stick with it for a long-term play. Since I finished T.H.E Marie, you know. Still going on Witcher, which is nice. And FGO, obviously, still going. Although, next week we might actually be back to Camelot. I think I'll be able to finish up what I want to do in Lilim Harlot on my own by the end of Sunday, which means when we get back to FGO, you won't have to watch me play Lilim Harlot anymore. And I will have Satanta. And all of his coins, ideally. And hopefully enough gold fucking rider statues to actually get Odysseus up to his final ascension. Because I think I saw assassin and rider statues in the shop, and that's what I'm running low on, so. Be nice to pick them up in the shop after getting Satanta's coins. Let's shift your guy bulk down because you're kind of holding him there. The figure's supposed to be holding him around there. So this is the way that the pop-up parade is, I think, supposed to look, about how much of the spear is supposed to be visible over his head versus behind his back. He doesn't grip the spear very tightly, so it's very easy to kind of like shift it up and down and left and right, which is part of the reason why it broke. Because if it was gripped a little tighter, it would be slightly more secure, and it's not. But there he is, in his full glory. I did manage to get the spear tip on straight from pretty much every angle, which is good, so you won't be able to notice any shift in sides, which is good. You're almost to the point where I want to, like, press down on your... Yeah, okay. You are also sealing quite well. I'll probably get you down on your base soon so that you finish sealing, like, on your base. Maybe right after we finish letting this Morgan spear dry and make sure you can lift it by the other end. It is so very detailed. I think it's so pretty. It's just very fragile. Very fragile. I love Nendroids. I hate their little pieces. This is why I put all my Nendroids in like one pose and like one outfit, and then I never change it. Because it's just not worth it to me. I don't want to keep track of all the tiny little pieces and shifting things and things that might break. It's easier to just pick a pose I like and go from there. And sometimes that means putting away the more delicate things, you know? I don't pose my Sesshomaru with all those, like, swords that had broken bases, you know? I don't give my Rimuru Tempest, wherever the fuck he is, his sword, because it's broken and I don't want to try to fix it. Alright, let us see. Okay, so we grab it by this end. Alright. We can twirl it. We can hold it. Alright, looks good. So we will be good to give this back to Knick-Knack on Sunday when I see him for recording. For the moment, I will put it inside of its bag so that we kind of keep it all together. Although I'm going to be very careful that that bag does not get creased in any way that could hurt this spear. So it's probably just going to live its life like right here off to the side of the camera. All right. It's time. It's time, girly pop. Let me go get the figure mug. Meet the figure mug. It's just a very, very large mug. Now, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to do something a little funky here. We're going to do a bit of mix and matching. We're going to put some E6000 onto it, but then we're also going to fill out a little bit more of it with the Gorilla Glue, in the hopes that we'll kind of, the E6000 can fill out some of like the space inside, but then we'll be able to, the crazy glue will hold it in place. And I may need to scoop it. Yep, I'm going to need to scoop it. I'm going to use the tip to scoop. Do not do this, children, at home. This is not a viable way to spread your crazy glue if you want it to still be useful. But my bottle is almost empty, and so it hates me already. So it's not a huge deal if I make it so that it's kind of largely unable to be used properly. So we put her upside down like this, and she just kind of fits perfectly. And we're going to grab a little bit more glue. Kind of dot along this bottom and this area here. And we want to get some over on the edges. Just kind of want to cover almost every inner portion of this figure in glue. And she's going to be standing up for the initial meeting of pieces. Okay, and now we see where there is excess. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to, and once again, don't do this at home, kids, but I'm going to wipe off excess. Oh my god, you're caught in my shirt. Okay. I'm going to use my finger to just wipe off all of the excess that I can access. Yeah, the excess that I can access, so that it's not super visible. It's a lot of glue. And then we're going to hold her for a minute until the Gorilla Glue sets. I know you can't kind of see what I'm doing, but I'm using myself as leverage to kind of press her down and hold her to her own base and glue. And then at some point, what we will do before we give her back to Knick Knack, if this fix holds, is I do have some black and purplish paint, and we will just go around sort of the edge of her boot, where you can currently see like glue marks, and we're going to erase that with a little bit of black paint and buffing. That way, you know, you see less of what's been done to fix her. So she will take a full 2 to 3 days to dry in the mug for us to be certain of kind of like her texture and whether or not she's like fully solid. But after 2 to 3 days, we will know whether or not this is going to work for her. Because after 2 or 3 days, the glue will be fully dry, and at that point, if she's not being held by the glue, we're going to have to consider other options. which includes and is not limited to actually starting to carve and drill into her foot, potentially to try to get at that metal peg, and see what we can do about either extending it or strengthening it. Or, as I've suggested to Knick-Knack before, creating a support for her knee that kind of comes down and maybe attaches to her base. If we have to create a support for her knee, then we can try to sculpt some sort of like, you know, maybe make it look like she's kind of like trying to move over something. And, you know, within the purview of moving over something, she's kind of her figure appears as though she's sort of starting to jump over something, but she's actually resting gently on it. Is the sort of more nuclear option, unfortunately. And there is a chance that that is the solution that has to be taken. We do not know yet. Oh my god, there's so much glue on my fingers. Better extra glue than not enough glue in this sort of case, though. So do not feel bad about all the extra glue. You will be very glad of it if the figure holds. And if it doesn't, it's going to come apart anyways, and then you can chisel off the extra. Right, let's see. Are you good to go into your figure mug? Okay, alright. We are in the figure mug. As you can see, so named because it just cradles the figure in a way that makes it a little bit easier for it to dry without any stress on her. So she'll sit there for a few days. I'll put her up on a shelf somewhere, and once she's on a shelf, she should be good to go. So last time this did actually work. Like, we were able to fix her by just gluing her back together. And then she did hold until she was knocked over. So long as she holds, I'm perfectly content with that, because I assume Knick-Knack will try very hard not to knock her over again. Because you know, and that's the thing. Sometimes things happen. You know, I've knocked over figures before. Sometimes they break, sometimes they don't. It's not a huge deal. 9 times out of 10, if you're really that concerned, then you're probably concerned enough to either replace the figure or fix it yourself, or, you know, you find out that maybe you didn't really care that much, you know? Like, I left Guy Bulg broken for like 3 months because honestly I was like, I can't really see it from a distance, you know, at the angle I was at, so it didn't really matter that he was a little bit broken. It's just that it started to bother me after a while. So yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm gonna be so sticky. I'm like trying not to touch anything until this glue dries, because after this glue dries I can like peel it off, but until it dries I'm kind of like stuck with sticky patches on my skin. So I too am trying and waiting to dry. Let myself kind of air slightly. I do want to try to get Marco back onto his base, because I would like him to dry sort of on his base per se. So I do need to... The problem is I'm very sticky. I really don't want to get excess glue on him. Alright. And sometimes you can get glue to dry faster by just... Yep, there we go. Those 2 fingers are sealed. Good do you. I mean, they'll have more to scrape off later, but... Yep, skin texture will get that stuff dry real fast. Okay, I have 1 dry hand. Alright. I do want to get him onto his base now. And get him sort of sealed down and on. And then his own weight will hold him. Okay. Lovely. At least it'll come off in like a larger... Oh my god, it's so bad. Oh, there's like wispies. There's so much glue on my fingers. Ah, the joys. Let's get the other finger involved in this. Don't try this at home, kids. Don't get glue on your fingers. Don't do what I'm doing. Not recommended. Your skin's natural oils will eventually make it less sticky. Like the natural dirt and oils on your own skin will eventually get you to a point where like it is no longer sticky. And then once it's no longer sticky, you should be able to like scrape it off. Usually like the tip of a needle typically works really well for me. Just kind of squidge it under the edge of like the texture bit, and then you should be able to go from there. Pro tip for getting glue off your fingers: the other solution is, of course, to bite it. I mean, I'm sure there's like a legitimate solution here, you know, like involving like some sort of cleaning product. But no. Okay. Got the last bit on this finger that still needs to solidify. God, could you imagine petting Peachy right now? Would be the worst. Okay, alright. All my fingers are dry. Fingers being dry means that I can seal things up for today. Yeah, that tip is wrecked. So this is MHX's sword, obviously. It's actually really cool. The sword is really nice quality in terms of like size and grip. She grips it very well. That's never been a problem for her. It actually fits in her hand right here. Technically, I can put her in there like that so I don't lose it. So we are going to, in fact, leave the sword in like that so that it does not get lost at some point, because this mug is going to just get moved kind of off to the side somewhere where I can occasionally check on it and monitor it, but I don't want to... So the good news is the base is already sticking to the figure foot. So that is great news. Some glue wispies. That's okay. We'll take those off. Glue wispies gone. So yes, I have hopes that, you know, we can just do another fix like this and then get it done, rather than needing to start making modifications to the figure. I would rather avoid doing that, personally. So yeah, the figure mug with MHX in it. You'll probably get an update on this in 3-4 days, maybe the next time Knick-Knack streams. But with that being said, that's honestly it for me today. I was just came on stream to repair some figures and talk to y'all. This is not going to be a constantly recurring series. Like I said, I've only got like one other broken figure at the moment that I'll be working on fixing, and you know, so this will just happen whenever I've got like a figure or two that might need like some TLC. So, you know, you might not see one of these anytime soon. But I hope you all had a good time. You know what? I'll add a channel in the Discord for people to like post pictures of like their anime figures and stuff if they would like to. I think that'll be fun. I added the pet pics, so, you know. On that note, we have a Discord. I'm streaming Friday morning. Witcher again. I don't think Nick Nack's streaming for the rest of the week, unless he's streaming tonight. I'll just go ahead and check the announcement, shall I? Yeah, no. He'll be streaming Fate Extella at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday. The Umbral Star. Yep. So, everyone, enjoy your day. Do something productive. Have fun. And I will see you next time.